Hey Thrivers, Heather here. Gonna wait just a few minutes, let some of you jump on. Excited to be here on our Thriving Thursday and share some important discussion with you guys about communication. So when we polled the group, we asked what you guys wanted to learn the most about this December. And by far, the most popular topic was communication. And we have a lot to say about that. So excited for that. But I'm just gonna wait. Let a couple people come on. Hi, I see a couple of you watching now. How's it going? Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you can hear me and see me okay. As you can tell, background just changed. Ben and I have moved from Arizona to Colorado, so it's been a very busy month for us, and we're adjusting to our new circumstances. It was a very difficult move. Unfortunately, things didn't go the way that we had planned, but we're settled now. Grateful. It's snowing outside. I had to close the windows because it was too bright. Thanks for the thumbs up. Appreciate that. But it's gorgeous. I was just out there with my little girls. We came in, we had hot chocolate. So I'm a little bit of a sugar buzz. I hope that you guys are doing well, enjoying this holiday season wherever you are. I love the snow. I love being here in Colorado. It feels so Christmassy and just feels like home to me. So I hope that your holidays are going good. I know that this time of year can honestly be difficult for a lot of people, especially when your relationship is struggling, because the holidays are so much about family and connection. And when things aren't right there, that can cause a lot of sorrow and difficulty around the holidays. So if you haven't already checked out the live stream that Mark did right before Thanksgiving, so you have to scroll back on the video files to find that one, he talked about how to handle the holidays when your relationship is struggling. He gives some really great pointers on some things that you can do to get through the holidays. You know, for a lot of people, it's like this really fun time. You know, for Ben and I, we're in a really great place. And so it's just wonderful to be there with our children and have that connection and focus on that love and everything. But if you don't have that, that can also be a really painful and difficult experience. It can also bring a lot of loneliness or sadness. And so that's something that we help coach people on right now at this time of year, because that often the contrast there of what the expectation is, what the holidays should be, and then versus what's actually going on in your real life circumstances can create some, you know, some difficulty there. So if you haven't checked out that live stream that he did, I would really recommend doing that. I'll probably post the link here when I'm done with this one, so you guys can check that out and get some good tips and resources there on how to handle the holidays. So, okay, we're talking about communication. Communication to me is like, it's kind of like Mount Everest in a relationship, right? Everything in a relationship comes down basically to communication. I also like to view of it kind of like a bridge. Like you're on one side and your spouse is across the mountain, the valley, on the other side. And every single thing that needs to happen in a relationship has to cross this bridge between you and your spouse called communication. If you want to talk about, should we have a dog? Should we get a dog? You have to cross the bridge of communication, right? If you want to talk about how to raise your children, if you should take on a new position, if you want to move, if there are family issues, if your spouse feels like you care more about your parents than you do about them, there you go. We have all of these bridges that have to be crossed. And the only mode that we have as human beings is communication. And it's more than just talking, right? We've all been talking. We've all learned talking when we were children. And so if communication were simply talking, there probably wouldn't be as many issues. But communication is so much more than that. It's truly understanding. It's coming together to have, you know, create ideas and to solve problems. So this idea of communication, how to cross that bridge for so many different issues, is really, really important. We have to cross the bridge of communication for daily business type aspects of just running a family and having a partnership, right? And so you have the daily tasks like your scheduling and the needs of the family, taking care of the bills, the groceries, and the car maintenance, all those different things. And so thanks for the thumbs up. Appreciate that. It helps me know that you guys are hearing me loud and clear. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comments here. be happy to talk to you guys about that. There's also a way, somehow I've heard, that you can come on live with me. So that might be something we want to explore later. It's a new feature from Facebook. I haven't exactly done it yet myself, but I've seen others do it. So if you know how and you want to come on and chat with me, I'd love to explore that. That might be really fun too. But if not, no worries. Yeah, so we have to talk about those business things. And we've all been there where there was a miscommunication about scheduling or about money, right? Maybe you had a certain expectation about where money was going to go that month and your spouse thought something totally different, and that can create a lot of tension, right? So we've all been there when we had a miscommunication over organization or over kind of like the business daily tasks of living together and having a family and running a family. So communication involves that, of having really clear lines there as much as possible to keep everyone on the same page and working together to avoid some of the conflicts that can come up through that miscommunication. So you have to have a bridge to cross between you and your spouse just to handle the daily aspects of life, right? If you like a certain kind of shampoo and your spouse keeps buying another one, there you go. You have to be able to cross that bridge of communication to be able to solve even a simple problem like that. It is amazing how many of those simple little daily problems can add up to some really big problems if communication isn't happening, if you feel like that bridge isn't able to be met, right? So we're going to talk about some of that, how to have a strong foundation of communication in your marriage for those little things, right? Those daily business tasks, as well as the more sensitive and intimate topics, right? All of those things, every single thing that we have emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually in a relationship has to be conveyed through communication. Unfortunately, we're not telepathic. We can't just read our spouse's mind and understand their perspective and communicate that way. That would be really cool, but we're not equipped like that as humans. So we have to be able to learn how to verbalize and express ourselves and understand where our spouse is coming from to have that bridge. So yeah, that's why I think this is a really big one, because it's like I'm over here, my spouse is over there. How do we meet in the middle? How do we convey our needs and everything that we need to do to get to that point where we understand each other, we're solving problems, we can overcome challenges, overcome big issues in our marriage. Even your husband snoring at night, or your wife neglecting to do something that you asked her to, or whatever it is, right? All of these things come up, and we really have to learn these skills of communication because they're not taught in school. They most likely were not taught in your home. Okay, and we're going to go a little bit into that. They're definitely not taught as much in the workplace as they need to be. They're not modeled in our culture. I mean, can you go onto Netflix and see a movie where there's like great, solid communication happening in a marriage? Very rarely. If you can think of a show that does that, then tell me. I'd love to see it and recommend it. Because when I'm on watching stuff, it's always about the conflict. It's always about the miscommunication. It's always about you hurt me, and it's the drama. That's what draws us in to watch it. But in reality, we're still not modeling what needs to happen in a relationship. So where do we go to learn these skills? Fortunately, they are skills, and they can be learned and practiced with time and diligence and determination. You can absolutely learn them. But just recognize that most of us, you and your spouse included, as well as most of us in our culture, have not been taught how to properly communicate with each other. Okay? So just recognizing that is actually a big relief, because we can say, okay, I haven't actually been taught this, but I do want to learn it. I do want to know how to communicate better. And with that being said, here, just post it in the comments real quick if you have an example in your life of someone who is good communication. That's the hot chocolate and the pregnancy talking probably, who models good communication in their relationship to you. Maybe it was your grandparents or your aunt or your best friend. Like maybe they just have this great communication in their relationship. And that's going to be really, really important to identify. So I want each of us to really step back and think, Who in my life is an example of a good communicator? What do they do? How do they communicate? How does that affect their relationships, right? And the reason why we want to identify that is because there's a huge lack of examples in our lives. So we want to cling to those that are good examples so that we can dissect what they're doing and even go to them if possible. Ask them, how is it that you communicate so well? Where did you learn this, right? What shift happened in you personally to get you to the place where you are? And being able to model that example will really, really help you in your life and learn to do what they're doing, understanding what successful communication, what it takes. So I don't know if my connection's slow, but I don't see any comments. So if you have an example, go ahead and post it. I'd like to hear that. And I know a lot of people watch the replay. So if you're watching the replay, I still read all the comments. So really think about that. Who is an example to you of good communication so that you can start to emulate what they're doing? Now let's talk about what kind of destroys the bridge here. And then we'll talk about how to build the stronger bridge between you and your spouse so that you can communicate these things well and have that strong communication that you're really wanting in your relationship. So the first one I'm going to talk about is if you're here and your spouse is over here and you want to communicate about something, what's going to destroy the bridge? Okay, so anything that is going to be negative, destructive, talking about criticism, blaming, bringing up the past, these kind of things, kind of like you throwing a volley of fiery arrows across the bridge and they're lighting the bridge on fire and causing certain parts of it to concave and fall down, right? As soon as we get into the really aggressive forms of communication, it's like you're wanting to get the point across to your spouse, you're wanting to solve some problems, but what you're actually doing is burning down the very bridge that you need to get there. And if you've been on the other end of that, where your spouse is kind of volleying them at you, you know how it feels. You feel like, whew, the bridge is gone. How are we going to get effectively to the place that we need to be now, right? So if you're in a habit of that, and it is so much a habit, we get into these conditioned habitual responses in our own lives, and especially in our relationships, where you just kind of go there without even thinking. So if you're in a habit of that, we're going to really need to work on what to do to replace those negative habits to get to some good ones. And I'm going to be really vulnerable and really honest here, okay? So Ben and I, we're going on almost 12 years of marriage this month, really exciting, but we've had some rough years in there, absolutely, some really, really rough years. And it kind of felt like when we had a problem or a hurt that someone did or said something that really hurt the other one, the way of communicating that it looked like in our relationship, and again, I'm just being really, really honest here, was that we would volley the fire at each other until we were so broken and the bridge was just like gone, like ashes, that then we were so broken and we had nothing left to do but to start to work effectively to each other. And a lot of the reason for that was because of some of those internal things going on, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, but that, for one, I didn't know how to process emotions effectively. That was not something that I was taught growing up. It was not a skill that I had learned. Ben's situation was very different, and that's another thing here. We've got these different perspectives of how we've grown up and what kind of communication was modeled to us. And so, not knowing how to process emotions, the only way I knew how to do it was to let it get so bad, like to tolerate it until I couldn't take it anymore. And then that would lead into the big explosion, right? It's kind of like I was dropping the atom bomb on a relationship, completely obliterating the bridge, nothing effective happening, but I didn't know how to process through my own emotions and be able to communicate my needs, my emotional needs, or communicate that something had hurt me or bothered me in a calm and effective manner. The only way I knew how to do it was through an explosion, it felt like I almost had to demonstrate to him in this angry ball of fire, I guess, how bad it hurt me and how angry and upset I was. Because if I just tried to say it subtly or something, I didn't know how to do that. It wasn't effective. I was scared of that. And I felt like it wouldn't be conveyed to him in the right way that I wanted, how much it really affected me and how much it really bothered me. Okay, so that was kind of the pattern that we were in. We would go several weeks being fine, and then something would happen. He would come home late, or he would spend time on the phone, and all of these things, these little tiny things would build up for me, to the point where then just I would start, he would start to sense that I was pulling back and that something was wrong. We wouldn't talk about it for a couple of days, or sometimes the opposite was true. He would start to pull back and something had been bothering him that he wouldn't come out and just, articulate to me clearly and in a safe environment with safe rules of communicating. And so it would just kind of boil up until boom, the bridge is demolished and we were both left on both sides, of the chasm, broken, to the point where it felt like, okay, well, where do we go from here? Then it felt like once things finally hit the roof, then we could pick up the pieces and start to work together. And we'd had to go through a lot of I'm sorry and a lot of, healing, and just an exhausting process. So I know a lot of people relate to that. This is not my situation alone, but I'm being very vulnerable about the way things were in our relationship until we learn how to develop these skills in our marriage. So then going through all of that, yeah, it was absolutely exhausting. And if you've been there, you know what that's like. And so we don't want to do that in relationships, right? We don't want to be dropping atom bombs on the only bridge that we have to be able to connect with each other and to be able to communicate and understand each other effectively. So I hope that makes sense. I hope I've articulated that correctly. And then another thing that can happen in our communicating when we have our bridge is lying. Okay, so it's like, or withholding part of the truth, withholding emotions, withholding feelings. So it's kind of like you're putting a piece. Oh, and I've got my girls in here. That's what happens. Yeah, you can. Go ahead and have it at the table, okay?
Mama, I don't know how to open it.
That's totally fine. Yeah, I've got the girls here home with me. I love being home with them.
Mommy,
but you want to come
open this?
Absolutely. So when we're lying, it's like we've put out a couple pieces of the bridge for our partner maybe to understand or grasp onto, but we're missing some holes. And so it's kind of like asking our partner, or hoping, depending on where you're at, that they'll be able to just step across the bridge with these missing planks. And that obviously is not a good form of communication. And when you're on the other side of any kind of deceitfulness, then you know how difficult that is to want to cross the bridge, because it's like you're expected to jump over these holes and the whole thing is going to crumble when you both try to do that. So any kind of lying or deceitfulness, withholding emotion, withholding the truth, withholding intimacy is like, we kind of want to connect, but we put some big barriers in our way. And now you're going to have to learn how to fill those holes back in. And that's the whole idea of restoring and rebuilding trust. And it's string cheese time. So pardon me for just a minute. There you go. You betcha. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that this analogy is kind of coming through in the way that I'm hoping it does. So now we want to talk about how to build that bridge to have that kind of effective communication. Yeah, go watch the movie, okay? Thanks, guys. I appreciate your patience. They're so sweet, and I love them. And they need to go watch their movie, but that's totally fine. I know you guys don't care. All right, so one of the first things that we need to do is to understand clearly what it is that we want to accomplish in our communication and what good communication actually looks to us. So this is one of the things that is very interesting to me. When you ask a person what they want, if I was asked to ask you, what do you want in your communication? 90% of the time, I get answers like, I don't want them to shut me out. I don't want them to tell me lies. I don't want them, I don't want them to criticize me. I don't want them to put me down. I don't want them to keep bringing up the past. I don't want this negativity. I don't want this tension. I don't want this silence that goes on between us for days, whatever it is, right? So it's interesting, and you can do this test too. When you ask someone what they want, we usually respond with what we don't want. And so what's really important is that we learn to reverse that, because there is a law of focus that what we focus on grows. Okay, so when we're thinking about everything that we don't want, what are we bringing more into our lives? Those things that we don't want. There's an example of this that when they're teaching professional race car drivers how to drive, they teach them to not look at the wall and to focus on the road ahead. And the reason why is because if they look at the wall, where are they going? They're going right into the wall every time. If they're so afraid of crashing, they go right into the wall. So it's like so many of us are trying to drive forward, and we want to drive forward. That's really where our heart and our intent is. But we're continually looking at the wall of everything that we don't want. And so we just keep crashing into that wall again and again and again and wondering what's wrong, why can't I just keep going forward? So with great love and respect, I would really encourage us to start focusing more on what we want than what we don't want. So knowing what you don't want is a great place to knowing what you do want, because all you have to do is reverse that. I don't want to come home and just have this tension between us. Okay, great. What is the opposite of tension to you? What is the opposite of silence to you? That tense kind of silence or that ignoring, right? What is that opposite of, the anger and the criticism, the explosiveness? What is the opposite of feeling like everything is boiling up to the point where you have to drop that A-bomb to get anywhere, right? Well, the opposite of that would be that I'm able to express when something bothers me in a safe way, and hopefully my partner can reciprocate that and understand that, and we can work through that. Okay, awesome. So you really want to start to focus on the kind of communication that you ideally want. It's kind of like we're trying to pick a destination on the map to go on a journey, but we don't really know where it is. If I was trying to go from Denver to New York, but I ended up in like Tennessee because I don't know where I'm going, that's not going to be very effective. So it's really making sure we understand where we want to go and why we want to get there. So one of the very first things that we want to do to build out that bridge is to understand, what does the bridge look like to me? And it's going to be different for all of us, okay? There's Kyle. Hey, Kyle. Race car analogy. Yeah, thanks. I like that one too. It's a really powerful one. And it's true. You can look it up. So what does that bridge look like for me? 'Cause like I said, it's going to be different. Maybe it's that we are able to speak in a normal tone. There is no raised voices, right? We're able to just speak calmly. That's what I want my bridge to look like. So I posted in a post, and I was going to go through these now, but it's going a little bit long. Some really great questions to ask yourself to identify exactly what it is that you want your communication to look like, so that you know where you're going, you know where your destination on the map is. Apparently, we need 2 string cheese today. Say hi, and say hi to everyone. Okay, there we go. And so there's some really great questions there, like, how do I want to look and sound when I'm communicating with my spouse? All right, I don't know if you've ever found yourself where you watched yourself on camera that you didn't realize someone was filming, and then you saw the way that you were looking, the way that you were sounding, and the way that you were talking. Okay, I'm going to be really honest again. I had this experience, I don't even know, probably a year or so ago, but one of my kids was filming, and I was upset at one of the kids for the way that they were doing their chore. And they caught me on camera, and I watched it, and I was appalled, okay, that I didn't realize I looked that way. I looked like so mad. Like, I was like, who is that person? And it was a very good experience for me, because it woke me up to the way that I'm really coming across. And so imagine that we had a camera on us all the time, and that, people outside our own home could see the way that we're looking and the way that we're talking, the way that we're sounding. Is that the way we really want to be communicating? So think about, how do you really want to look and sound when you are talking, as if you were in front of a mirror, right? And that can be a really good wakening up experience to understand how you're really contributing to things, right? And you may not even realize what is going on there. All right, and then there's other really great questions. Again, I'm not going to go through this all, but I encourage you to go through that post, really dive deep and ask yourself, how do I want to feel when I'm communicating? What kind of internal thoughts do I want to have when I'm communicating? What is the best way we could have a conversation about a difficult topic? What is a fun conversation I would love to have with my spouse? So that as you identify these things, you can really start to work toward them, just like we're going to start to pick that destination on a map. And, you know, you may be in California trying to go to New York. You may feel like you have a long ways to go, but now's the time to start. You may be closer than you think. You never know. All righty. All right, last thought I have, and I'm probably going to do a second part with this with Mark tomorrow. I know we got a lot of really great questions and examples from you guys that you wanted us to dissect and help you with on your communication. So the last thing I want to talk about is really going a little bit deeper probably than you might anticipate when we're talking about communication. You might be thinking like, Heather, I just want to learn, you know, I just want my husband to pick up his socks off the floor. Like, I just want to learn how to have a nice argument, you know, and how to handle disagreements. But what I really want to work on here is going a little bit deeper with, can you go play? Okay.
But we want to go play in the snow.
Well, we'll do that in a little bit, okay?
This is not mine.
Is understanding the root issues. This is something that we really work on a lot with our clients, and that we found is crucial to really uncovering what's going on in a relationship, okay? And these different conflicts or different issues that we have.
No.
I said we'll do that in just a minute now, please. Okay. I'm doing this for these people, okay? Thanks, sweetie. I'll be there in just a few minutes.
Okay.
So I really appreciate this idea of focus and understanding some of the root issues going on in ourselves internally that manifest themselves externally in the way that we feel, the way that we think, and the way that we behave. There is a quote by Raymond Hollywell from the Master Key System. What comes to us in the world without is what we already possess in the world within. What comes to us in the world without is what we already possess in the world within. Okay, so uncovering what some of that is, you know, what some of those things are. And maybe you feel like, you know, we have these goals, we have these intentions of having this great relationship, of being this kind of person. And maybe you feel like you're working really, 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 really hard. And you feel like you're working really, really hard and you're putting forth all of this effort, but you're not really getting the results that you want. And oftentimes what's happening is that you're focusing more on the external results and those world of effects rather than what's going on inside that could be causing some of those effects. I'm going to give some case examples here at the end to illustrate what I mean, but focusing on those external effects, so focusing on the way that your spouse communicates, right? Focusing on everything that your spouse is doing, that's part of that world of effects, and that's really not going to get you anywhere. One of my mentors, Dave MacArthur, he has an amazing podcast on personal development. I'll shoot the link probably down below too. But he talks about how when you're focusing on the world of effects, it's kind of like you're standing in the middle of a swimming pool and you're throwing the water up into the air. And it's like you're trying to empty out the pool by throwing the water up into the air. And it's really not going anywhere, right? And you feel like, okay, I really want this to happen. So you just start thrashing and throwing the water harder and harder and harder. And you're like, if I just work really hard on this, you know, I can do it. But the water is just coming straight back down on you. And that's like working on the world of effects, on everything outside of us. So instead of doing that, what we need to do is go inside and unplug the plug at the bottom of the pool and let the water drain out. Okay, so some really important things here is to understand, what are you thinking? What are those internal thoughts? What are those internal beliefs that you have about yourself, about your spouse, about your marriage? What are my expectations? What belief is causing these effects out there, and what's making them stay the same? Okay, because maybe I'm working really, really hard and putting forth all this effort, but I'm not actually addressing what needs to be addressed. I know this is going deep, but this is really where the magic happens. This is where the change and the growth and the progress in relationships happen. So here's an example. We've just got lots of fun going on in here. All right, so client number one, I'm just going to call him client number one. This woman had this lens on, okay, of this false perception that she had about her husband, okay? And she had a good reason for having this perception, that things had been a certain way in their relationship where he had not been very understanding. He had not been very compassionate. He had not been very mindful of her needs for many, many years. Okay, we're talking like almost a decade of time. So she had built up this idea about who her husband was and what he would do, right, in their relationship. And what was interesting is that because she'd been through all of that, she had created this idea and this belief based on what was really going on in the relationship, so that to the point now where even when he was changing, she couldn't see it. She was still holding on to that old thought and idea about what her husband was and like how he acted. Hold on just a minute. I'm going to ask the girls to go play. I'm going to be right back. Sorry.
Let's go play. We can't go no more.
Okay, apologize. I'm back. You got the nice little belly shot and 7 months pregnant right now. So we're doing good, and I appreciate your guys' patience and my children's patience too. So what was interesting was that with all of that going on, we asked her to describe exactly how she wanted her husband to communicate with her. She said, I want him to be kind. I want him to listen. I want him to show understanding. And we guided them through a conversation, and he did it, like to the T. But she, at the end, for whatever reason, couldn't see it. So sometimes we've got these lenses on that are clouding our perspective of what's happening. And so we asked her, did he do that? And finally, things kind of broke down, the walls broke down, and she recognized that he was. And the reason why she didn't want to see it was because of this internal fear that now she had to look at herself. And it was easier, she admitted, to look at everything he was doing and to constantly, put it on him so that she didn't have to look at herself. And she didn't have to feel some of the pain and the regret of the things that she had done wrong. Once we were able to help her break through that barrier, things started changing really rapidly for them, right? She recognized, oh, wow, I have been living blindly for a while because I wanted to protect myself. And he actually is making changes. And now I can feel safe to make some changes too. But that fear of having to look at herself was holding her back. So I'm encouraging you to look at yourself. What might be holding you back? What might be those, those internal fears, those internal doubts or insecurities? And you might have really, really good reason for them being there, but are they still valid now? If they are, then there's something else to work on. But if they're not, if things have transformed, but you're just not seeing it because of whatever resistance you have, then there's that too. So there's a really good example there on how some of those internal work, rather than feeling like, oh, he needs to listen to me. That's like throwing the water up in the air. It just keeps coming back down. And so being like, you know what, I've got to make some changes in me. And I've got to let go of some of this fear to allow that to happen. So working on some of that mindset is really, really important, and understanding where you are internally. All right, now client number 2, I just recently spoke with him, and we never share names publicly, but just to keep privacy and everything. But with this person, there was a huge amount of anxiety in his conversations. His wife is completely checked out of the relationship, does not want to work on it with them. As many of you know, that's kind of what we specialize in. We help all relationships, but specifically those that are in kind of the ICU and needing immediate intervention to turn things around. So in his conversations, he was expressing that he was stumbling over his words. He didn't know what to say. He would just kind of clam up, or he would just be silent and awkward and not himself. They'd been married for over 20 years. And so that was kind of where he was at as far as communicating. He felt like he couldn't reach her. He couldn't even say the words. He would stumble over his words. And so dissecting that, where was that anxiety coming from? What were those fears there? And what's interesting is that a lot of really great help out there will show you the words to say and what to say. But if you are conveying them from an internal state of disbelief or an internal place of anxiety and fear, is that going to be effective communication? So really, that's what I enjoy doing, and that's my passion, is helping people move through that internal fear, internal resistance, uncovering those limiting beliefs. What is the root issue there going on behind that? Because you might learn the right words to say, you might read all the books, you might watch all the YouTube videos, you might feel like you're doing everything right. It's just throwing water up in the air, right? Until you really shift what is going on internally. Uncovering that limiting belief, clearing that limiting belief, moving through some of that fear, got him to a place where now he's in a state of calmness. He is centered. His focus is on being genuine to himself and rooted like a rock in the midst of the hurricane, right? So that no matter what, he feels like he is himself and he is able to communicate effectively from that kind of a place. And that's a lot of work, right? That's a lot of work. And it takes a lot of vulnerability and willingness to do that, to really look deep at yourself and understand where you might be blocking yourself in your communication. Maybe it's your past conditioning, the way that your parents raised you, all those different things. So really understanding that and working on those things is what's going to get you going forward really fast. So Dana's comment here, I feel this is what my husband does with me. I feel like I'm changing, but he doesn't see the change, right? And that so often happens when one partner starts to make a lot of change. And what's interesting is that it can bring up a lot of different things for your partner. A lot of fear of change, resistance to it, or just simply unwillingness to see it. And that can be very frustrating for you on your part as you're trying to make these changes. It kind of feels like, why am I doing it? I'm doing all of this and it's not good enough, right? But there are things that you can do to bridge that gap again. And sometimes it's that your partner needs to have a little bit of a wake-up call, understand what the root issues are going on with them. And then there are other things that you can do to build up your own level of patience, your own level of compassion and understanding and empathy, because change takes a long time, right? It's a lot of work. And so when you have these two people on these two opposite ends of the canyon, learning how to start to build that bridge back together is really, really important. So I hope this is helpful. Mark and I do plan to do another live stream. I think maybe tomorrow, but we'll see. I'll definitely post it. Mark's in a little bit of transition right now with his family. So had a baby born a little early. So they're dealing with that right now. But anyway, we do want to serve you guys and go through some more of these situations and these examples on how you can communicate effectively. But to sum it all up, understand the things that destroy communication when you're trying to build that bridge, and start to replace some of those habits with the good things that you want as you focus on the kind of communication that you want. Once you know what you want, then go deep into yourself and understand what might be holding you back, what might be perpetuating that habit for you, so that then you can unplug that and get all the bad out so we can start to put the good in and get you moving forward. So appreciate you guys. Hope you're having a wonderful holiday season, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, thanks.